I'd like to talk about what it means to be enlightened, how that unfolds in your day-to-day experience, the different kinds of attainments that you can have, and how you can kind of check yourself for where you're at, what it means to be where you're at. So the first and most essential thing is that there is the attunement you have to the present moment. So if you're all the way in the present moment without any separation, then you're able to move without having any extra beingness. You're able to have your experience without a person in your experience who's separate from your moment, observing your moment. And that's this thing with no observer, that's that thing with non-duality. When you have thoughts, there's just thoughts. There isn't a impression of a separate being who is thinking those thoughts. When you're seeing, there's just the sight. There isn't a separate impression of a person who is seeing. When you're hearing, there's just what you hear. There isn't a separate impression of a person hearing. And when you're speaking, there's just words appearing. There isn't someone, as an impression of the person who's saying things. And that's the most essential thing, is this principle of being fully non-separate from the present moment, where truly everything that occurs in your experience doesn't have a thing observing it, even analyzing it, examining it, commenting on it. All of these are illusory separations from the present moment. In the thought stream, there's just thoughts. Those thoughts aren't pulling themselves into separated positions of, this is the thought, and then this is me, and I'm examining the thought or figuring it out. So with that non-separation from the present moment, there's a fundamental peace and a bliss and a joy, a fundamental immovability or certainty, where this familiarity you have with the formless, non-arising intelligence that is everything, the intelligence that creates every single thing but doesn't arise, isn't experienced, isn't perceptible. There's just a knowing that that's the reality and that's what's creating everything. And then these external forms, you recognize that they aren't the reality. There's no grasping them. When something happens, it doesn't cause you pain in the same way that it did before, where there's this idea that it's so important, that it's the most important thing at these passing forms, and then there's not attachment to those forms either. There can also be non-attachment to all forms. So no matter what's arising, there isn't any pull towards the form, and there isn't any of the form pushing you away. So when you're eating food, or when you imagine, when there's something that you are experiencing, there's no part of you that has some kind of idea of a state locked up in that form. So you might experience speaking about enlightenment on a video, but there isn't a part of you that has a particular idea of a different kind of state, something that you can get, which is only inside of that form and not available all the time. So this idea that like you need to do things in order to get things is just gone. This idea that you have to have a form to get a state isn't present anymore. And there isn't any greed or aversion on these wide scales for different things, where it's almost like every single moment you're either being pulled towards something, you want more of a good thing, but you want less of a bad thing. There isn't any of that. You're just fully in the present moment and non-separate from it. In that non-separation, we can find behaviors that arise that are conditioned. And these conditioned behaviors are things like when you're eating your meal, maybe unconsciously you're going and getting another bite and you didn't notice that you went to get another bite and you're eating a little too fast. And these unconscious conditioned habits are just a part of the human experience. They aren't. The thing with enlightenment is when you're in an unconscious habit and something's happening to you or happening with you that you're not fully conscious of, you're doing something a little unmindfully. You don't have to be completely mindful to be enlightened. You're completely non-separate from the present moment while it's happening. It doesn't seem like there's this separate person made of these conditioned habits that are flowing through, that is this tangible thing that has like appeared or then like disappeared. There isn't this idea that there's this separate person who is tied up with certain patterns or ways of being. There's this fluidity with the moment. And these are kind of the broad... Oh, I completely forgot to mention. There's no suffering. So there's no pervasive pain in your experience. When there's a being in your experience, when there's a thing that you are, there's always this subtle separation or pain or edginess or offness to experience that separates you from the present moment. And when you're perfectly in union with the present moment, there isn't any of that pain arising anymore, and it's this pervasive pain. It's like it's there in every single moment when you're not enlightened, and it's not there in every single moment when you are enlightened. And there's different levels of that, and the levels of relinquishing that suffering are levels of relinquishing how much of a being you are, how much beingness you're holding. When you aren't holding any more beingness, there isn't any more suffering. And these other attainments, this fundamental pain of beingness is kind of the thing you see a lot of people having had attained, and once they've attained that, they're like, I'm good. And that's fair enough. There are deeper levels where you're no longer working on not suffering, you're just evolving and expanding your awareness and your beingness and your attunement to the present moment. You're getting deeper and deeper into the present moment. And those are, optional. For me, I released all pain, all of the suffering related to a being. And I really, really wanted full enlightenment, the most complete attainment. So I've just kept going, and I still keep going, which is always surprising. But since the moment where I fully let go of the concept of a self, the experience of a self, there's been no pain. And you could say there's a certain level of peace and bliss from that. But after that, the thing where I became completely detached from form came in, where now, there's no matter what form arises, there isn't this idea of a state in it. That came afterwards. And then the deepening into the present moment, that's just been happening over and over and over and over. I would say that the big thing that I like to cultivate in the people that I try to help, and after they get it, they stop talking to me usually, because that's kind of it gives you so much freedom that you're kind of good to go for the rest of your life, is this first tapping into the non-arising formless intelligence, where you see that it is the thing that's running the show, and all of the conditioned beingness, all of the perceptions, all of the forms that are going past like a show aren't the thing that is creating everything. And it seems like there's this escalation of seeking until you hit that point, and then there's this slowdown. And in this slowdown, this could be many lifetimes, or it could be one lifetime, or it could be a year, where you're just releasing and relinquishing everything. Yeah. So, for me, when I was a seeker, I really wanted someone to just sort of explain what are the deepest levels of attainment? What can you really get to? And I think this is kind of what I wanted to provide here as well, is like, here's a living example of the things that I've said, and it's a really fundamental moment to moment shift where there's never a moment where you're not completely non-separate from the present moment. There's never a being arising. There's never an extra thing other than the present moment existing, coexisting in the present moment. It's always just the present moment. Thanks so much, everyone. Wishing you all happiness, peace, liberation, harmony with the world, and joy, ever more joy. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I will be posting more videos and you will see them in your subscription feed. Thanks so much. I'm gonna get back to the mountains now. I'm actually gonna show you the mountains. Beautiful here. All right. See you around.